All right, we're about to dive into a real mystery, one that sits at this incredibly strange intersection of pure mathematics, mysticism, and the human mind. And it all kicks off with this one single haunting image. So, just take a good look. Seriously, what is this shape say to you? Let your mind just kind of wander for a second. What sorts of patterns or figures start to emerge for you out of this ghostly light? Maybe you see a sprawling galaxy, something captured by a deep space telescope? Or is it something more spiritual, like an aura or a spirit? Maybe even a figure meditating, totally calm and centered in the middle of all that darkness. Okay, get ready for this. The truth is way weirder than any of those possibilities. This image is not a photograph. It's not some artist's creation. It is pure, unadulterated mathematics. It's what you get when you let a simple equation just run over and over and over again toward infinity. So, how does cold, hard math end up creating something that feels so, well, alive? To even begin to understand how this is possible, we need to go looking for a kind of universal blueprint. And we're going to find our clues in two very different worlds: the infinite, beautiful patterns of mathematics and the deep, hidden structures of the human mind. First up, fractals. The simple definition is just a never-ending pattern. The best way to think about it is like a coastline on a map. You zoom in, you see all these little bays and inlets that look, well, a lot like the bigger coastline. Zoom in again on one of those little bays, and the pattern just repeats. That's called self-similarity, and it's the core idea of a fractal. And once you know what to look for, you start seeing these things literally everywhere. You see them in the delicate, one-of-a-kind structure of a snowflake, the way trees branch out, the way our own blood vessels branch out, and even in the stunning designs of the cathedral's rose window. It really seems to be a fundamental building block for both nature and the things we create. So, that mysterious image we started with, it's a special type of fractal called the Buddhabrot. It's a really particular way of looking at the famous Mandelbrot set. But instead of mapping the points that stay put, it tracks the paths of all the points that fly off to infinity. And the result is this spectral, kind of human-looking shape. Now, for our second huge idea, this one comes from a totally different field, from the famous psychologist Carl Jung. He came up with this concept he called the unus mundus, which is Latin for one world. It's this pretty wild idea that our inner world, our mind, our psyche, and the outer world of physical matter aren't actually two different things. He thought they were just two sides of the same coin, emerging from one deeper, unified reality. So here's the crucial part. Jung, along with this absolutely brilliant physicist named Wolfgang Pauli, started to wonder, what could the language of this unified reality even be? And the answer they landed on was mathematics. They had this incredible idea that maybe numbers and equations weren't just tools to describe the world out there, but could also describe the deep, fundamental structures of our own minds. And the structures of our minds, at least according to Jung, are built on something he called archetypes. These are universal patterns or symbols. You know them, even if you don't know the term. Things like the hero's journey, the nurturing mother figure, or the tree of life that connects heaven and earth. These things pop up in myths and religions all over the world, across all of history. They're kind of like the psyche's version of fractals. So, what happens when we take this mathematical ghost, the Buddhabrot, and see if it actually fits the archetypal patterns that humanity has been creating for thousands of years? Well, this is where things start to get really, really strange. Let's start way back with Stonehenge, built around 2500 BC. It was this ancient attempt to map the cosmos, right? Well, when we overlay the Buddhabrot, look at that! The glowing rings of the fractals seem to align almost perfectly with those sacred stone circles. The mathematical pattern is echoing the ancient architectural one. We see a similar thing in ancient Egypt. On this pendant from King Tut's tomb, the central teardrop shape of the fractal perfectly frames the sacred scarab beetle. That glowing orb at the top even seems to line up with the sun it's carrying, which was a core symbol of renewal and divinity. It's an uncanny match. And this pattern isn't just in ancient artifacts, it resonates with one of the most iconic pieces of art in history. When you place it over the Mona Lisa, the Buddhabrot's form seems to cradle her head, trace her famous jawline, and just align with that mysterious posture that has fascinated us for centuries. This isn't just confined to the past, either. It shows up in modern art that's trying to depict visionary or altered states of consciousness. You look at psychedelic art, which is just full of fractal-like imagery, and the similarity to the Buddhabrot's form can be absolutely unmistakable. These visual echoes, I mean, they're pretty startling, but what do they actually mean? Is this some profound connection we're seeing, or is it just a trick of the eye? What does it mean when a mathematical object seems to be looking back at us with a human face? And that leads us right to the heart of this whole mystery. Are we actually discovering some kind of hidden order that connects the world of math to human culture? Or are our brains just so good at finding patterns that we're basically seeing meaningful shapes in cosmic static? Okay, so there are two main schools of thought here. On one hand, you have cognitive bias. Our brains evolved to be hyperactive pattern-finding machines, right? Seeing a face in the clouds or a figure in a dark forest probably kept our ancestors safe. So maybe we're just hardwired to see a human shape in the Buddhabrot. But on the other hand, you have the unus mundus hypothesis, that maybe the mathematical laws that create this fractal and the psychological laws that create our archetypes are both bubbling up from the exact same deep, unified source. And what's so fascinating is that when you look at research into altered states of consciousness, you find these fractal-like patterns again and again and again. People report seeing them in psychedelic visions, they appear in art made by people with schizophrenia, and they're described in mystical texts from all over the world. It really suggests these patterns aren't just random noise, but might be a fundamental part of how our consciousness is actually structured. And this leads to what might be the most mind-bending idea of all. Jung and Pauli took it a step further. They actually speculated that these archetypal patterns, the very building blocks of our psyche, might also be the building blocks of physical reality itself. So, we're left with this question that just hangs in the air, a lot like the fractal itself. Is the Buddhabrot just a beautiful but ultimately meaningless coincidence? A ghost in the machine born from our pattern-seeking brains? Or could it be a faint echo of a much deeper order? A clue that the patterns hidden deep within our minds and the patterns of the entire cosmos are actually singing the exact same mathematical song.